Hello, everybody. My name is Jodie Nealley. I'm the Voluntary Self-Exclusion and Outreach Liaison for the Mass Council on Gaming and Health. Thank you for opening up our webinar on building the tools in your recovery toolbox. Here's a description of the workshop that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about identifying the many recovery tools that are out there for those who are struggling with problematic gambling and to help you in your recovery or help someone you love in your recovery. We have several members of our Recovery Advisory Board here. We'll talk about their experiences and their pathways to recovery, and we'll go over a lot of resources and tools that will help you. There's been an awful lot added on during COVID-19 and that a lot of people may not know about, so we will get to that. A little bit about the Mass Council. I've been there since 2012. I'm a alcoholic and a gambler in recovery. And I have the privilege of working with this agency whose mission is to help folks who are struggling with problematic gambling and their loved ones, and to raise awareness of it, and to train clinicians and educate legislatures and advocate for more awareness of gambling disorder. The Recovery Advisory Board, as I say, we have several members here today, was formed in 2015. These are all people in recovery, and they will tell their stories and they will talk about their pathways to recovery. I think that stories really get to the heart of the matter and really resonate with a lot of people. So I am so grateful that they are here and willing to open up their hearts and tell their stories to you. Okay, we're going to start with Chris K. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris, and I'm a compulsive gambler. I would like to share some of my experience, strength, and hope, and talk about my recovery toolbox. Like most of us who have a gambling problem, gambling addiction, I had to hit my rock bottom before I told anyone about what I was doing and before I sought any help. I didn't know what to do when I had gotten to the point where I was about to lose everything, including my best friend and roommate, and possibly my life. I ended up inadvertently talking to someone that I had met online. And ironically, I had met him in person at several casinos. This was the first time I had reached out for help, and I didn't even realize that I was asking for help. He hounded me to get in touch with Gamblers Anonymous, and I did that through a phone call to the Mass Council. From there, I started my journey of recovery. It took me a while to start to build a recovery toolbox. But the first tool in my recovery toolbox remains asking for help. Although I thought that talking to this friend was my first attempt at asking for help, on further reflection, I realized that I had already started this process by praying to my higher power to help me stop gambling. I didn't realize that God had answered that prayer by putting a person in my path that would help me to seek the help that I needed. These, for me, are the two components of asking for help. First, to seek help through a higher power. That is a personal journey for each person. And I was fortunate to already have a belief in a God of my understanding. Secondly, seeking help by talking to other compulsive gamblers and sharing my story with them. Asking for help also involves reaching out to help other people. Sometimes when I help another person, I find out that it helps me even more. The second tool in my recovery toolbox is attending meetings in 12-step programs. Once I started going to meetings, I met people that told their story. Some stories were like mine and some were not like mine, but the important part was identifying with the feelings. Those feelings are the basis of how I got to my rock bottom with gambling and how I got to where I am in my recovery. Another important tool in my toolbox was getting a sponsor. That took a while for me to reach out to someone, but that was one of the best things I ever did. That added so much to my recovery because my sponsor and I worked together on the 12 steps of recovery on a one-on-one basis. That for me was when real change in me and my recovery took place. The other tool that has helped me tremendously and has hopefully helped others is getting involved. I have been involved as a secretary of my groups. I have helped to run a recovery retreat. I've done presentations at conferences. I've sponsored people, and I have stayed involved with the Mass Council. To sum this up, I need to continue to participate in my own recovery. So one of the big things in my recovery was Gamblers Anonymous. So I'll speak a little bit on that. Gamblers Anonymous is a 12-step recovery program intended to help problem gamblers. I started attending meetings in GA in 2004. And there were several meetings close to where I was living. And the important thing for me was to be able to get to several meetings a week. Most of the GA meetings consist of reading one of the 12 steps and doing some other readings from the GA literature. Usually someone chairs the meeting and shares their story. Then the meeting is open to anyone who wishes to speak. I found out early it was important for me to talk about my gambling problem and myself in general. And I met several people at these meetings who reached out to help me. Being a member of a 12-step program means reaching out and supporting each other throughout recovery. I didn't know how to get really involved, but I kept attending meetings and listening. This is how I first learned about the 12 steps, and that became a really important part of my recovery. Every group has a phone list of the members who attend that meeting, and it is important to get to know the people and to have those numbers so that you can reach out to someone. This is especially important if you need to talk to someone when you have an urge to gamble or you just need someone to talk with. Program is sometimes called a self-help program, but it actually is a program of people helping people. So then there is another 12-step fellowship that I have been involved with, and it's called Betters Anonymous. Betters Anonymous is another recovery group. And there is no reason why that one can't attend Gamblers Anonymous and Betters Anonymous. There is definitely a lot of recovery in both fellowships. The history of BA is that it was an outgrowth of people who, after many years in GA, decided to form the Betters Anonymous Fellowship based on the original 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It started in 1990 in Stoneham, Mass., and now has several other meetings. It also has meetings in several other states and some in Canada. The meeting list and other important information can be found on their on the BA website. I was first introduced to BA when I had to move to New Hampshire and couldn't find a GA meeting close by. A longtime GA member told me about Betters Anonymous and suggested that I check them out. Then when I got a sponsor in GA, she was also very involved in BA. At the time that we were working on the steps, we started to attend a BA meeting together. Because BA uses the longer steps, as I said, originally AA steps, it tends to be more spiritually based. Although the steps in both groups are the same principles, the wording is different in some of the steps. These meetings helped me a lot at the time that I was doing my step work. And I've been able to continue during the last couple of years by attending some Zoom meetings. And I think there may be still some on Zoom. I'm not exactly sure, but the website can tell anybody who's interested the current information. So that about sums up a lot of my recovery steps and what I continue to do with my recovery. So I'm going to turn it over now to Larry.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Larry G. I'm a compulsive gambler, and my last bet was April 19th, 2013. And that's how we begin every therapy at a GA meeting. I'm a member of GA, and I've been a member of GA for many years. But my recovery is probably unique in a lot of ways. I was abstinent from gambling for many, many years, for 5 years before I actually started my recovery. I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't figuring it out. I mean, I was committed to not gambling, but my sponsor took me to a retreat sponsored by this council, and through the various conversations and programs and specialists that were available to me, all of a sudden, I remember having a conversation with one such specialist, and she asked me a question, and it was like she could look right into my soul. And she just took me apart and then rebuilt me before I left the room. And all of a sudden, I was on my road to understanding that I needed to recover. And as part of that recovery, it was understanding that I'm compulsive in a lot of places. Fortunately, I don't have other physical addictions, but you know, that doesn't differentiate me from somebody who does. I'm compulsive in so many areas of my life that I needed to have a new frame of reference and a new way of thinking about my behavior and about what was acceptable and not acceptable behaviors for me. And it all started with how I think. And I call the way I was thinking when I was gambling stinking thinking, because it involved hiding and lying and not being truthful to the people that were important in my life. And as a result, I would, the period of gambling made me so irresponsible to the people around me, to my job and everything else, that I was on a downward spiral and didn't even know it. Getting into Gamblers Anonymous, I was in Gamblers Anonymous the whole period. And all of a sudden, as I started into the recovery phase, all the steps that I'd been talking about and hearing the therapies all of a sudden started coming together for me. From step one, and accepting the need for a higher power, and to in whatever form that is for each individual, that higher power is something that holds me accountable for my behaviors. And it says, you know what, I can't do this alone. I need help. And yes, the help has to start with me, but I have to accept that others in my life are really important and my behavior affects them. And so the next logical step for me was to get involved with the council, but it's also to be a sponsor to others. I had to have a sponsor myself in order to understand what a sponsor can do for somebody. I think that I'm glad that you're here. If you're listening to this program and looking for help, there's a lot of help out there, and there's a lot of people that have undergone a lot in the process of trying to get their lives in order, to be able to manage what they do day to day, to do the things they need to do to save their families and be part of their families moving forward. So you're in the right place and you've started the right process. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jodie.
Yes, thank you, Larry. I want to just make a note of this recovery road too. Thank you, Larry and Chris, very much for sharing your story and your pathways. This third one, this recovery road online, is a literally online only program, very much like GA or BA in terms of 12 steps. I have heard very good things about it. It only started in about 2019, I think. But they have a lot of online meetings. They have meetings for women. They have meetings for newcomers. There was a woman who was on one of our webinars last year who just swore by it, and she liked it very much. So the information on there, you might want to check that out. Okay, now I'm going to ask, if I can get to that slide, I'm going to ask Catherine to talk about her experience with Gam-Anon.
Oh, thank you, Jodie. I'm Catherine O, and I'm a member, forever grateful to be a member of Gam-Anon. It is a fellowship program for people who have been affected by the disease of gambling. I grew up in a home where there was a compulsive gambler. I am from a long line of gamblers. Both my parents were raised in homes where there was also gambling, and I grew up in Ireland, and it was very much a subculture of gambling. The gaming laws were very lax. And at a young age, I was gambling at the local um, beaches where they had the slot machines. And as a kid, 7 years of age, I was gambling. And, my dad would take me in and out of bookie shops, and I was in a cloud of smoke, and it was a lot of fun and a lot of action. Um, Looking back now, I did not really understand the emotions that were in turmoil in the home that I was growing up. In fact, I probably idealized my father, the gambler, because I did not want to identify with the anger of my mother. Um, I was also somewhat impulsive as a child myself, so I was always running away. So it was no big shock that I would run away from Ireland and the home of a compulsive gambler. And I came to this country and married somebody who wasn't a gambler, but when the casinos opened in the next state, he started to gamble. And, over the course of his gambling career, which started in the early 90s, I gambled with him also, not understanding the progression of an illness. And from there, we were both gambling pretty together. So as a child, I didn't understand that I had been emotionally impacted, and I had brought a lot of flaws into the marriage. In Gam-Anon, a lot of people come in, and myself also coming in thinking I had hit my rock bottom when I learned he was having an affair. Initially, when I came in, I was very broken. I didn't understand the disease. I sought help with a wellness doctor who referred me to Gam-Anon. It took me maybe 2 or 3 years to understand that gambling was the problem. I was in absolute denial, and I had strong patterns of the same behaviors as the gamblers in my life. When I first came into Gam-Anon, which is close to 20 years ago now, initially I was, I couldn't string a sentence together. Financially, everything was falling. I mean, I call those my henny penny days, because I think it was a mental breakdown. I'm not sure. I don't know how to qualify it to this day, but I can share that when I came into that program, I learned to listen, and I listened to learn, because I was listening to all these other people before me who had been impacted, and how they found a new way to cope, grow, and change with the gamblers in their life. I had seen it from, worm's eye as a child and a bird's eye as a spouse. So it was quite the head wrecker in the early days. But I kept going back every Sunday to that meeting, because something was changing inside me, and I didn't understand it at the time. So it was like a slow drip of reality, because I know now, after many years, I had a very warped reality after growing up in the home of a compulsive gambler. Today, I have still struggled with that reality, but it is what it is. I've lived under the roof of gamblers for over 40 years. And one of the things about this Gam-Anon program is that, they urge you to keep coming to Gam-Anon, even if your gambler continues to gamble. In my case, both my gamblers continue to gamble, which is known as an active gambler, which made it very difficult. But then I just want to share with you the purposes of Gam-Anon. To welcome and give assistance and comfort to those affected by someone else's gambling problem, to communicate Gam-Anon's understanding of compulsive gambling, and its impact on our lives, to share our experience, strength, and hope in coping with the gambling problem, to use the steps and tools of the Gam-Anon program, which nurture our spiritual and emotional growth and recovery. I really had to work on my emotional growth. I didn't understand how damaged I had been coming from the home of a compulsive gambler. And I really had to work on how I was going to recover. I would continue, as I said, to go to these meetings. And when I came to step 4, which is to make a searching and fearless moral inventory, I would write around the clock about humility, anger, forgiveness, healing, my relationships with money, with people, specifically my ex-husband now, my fears, my responsibility, my self-worth, honesty, tolerance, control, love, spirituality, trust. It was like my life had gone into one big cauldron, and only I could make the big stir to see how I was going to make it all work. I continue to go to Gam-Anon, and it's basically because it is my lifeline on how I take care of myself. It's become a program of self-care for me. I also like to walk, meditate, write, go into nature. I have serenity. I have still chipping away at learning to cope, grow, and change. What I've learned in hindsight is that no two gamblers are alike. I am in acceptance that I was born into this disease. And I've raised 2 children who have also been impacted by this disease. And lastly, I want to just share from our literature from Gam-Anon, the explanation of compulsive gambling as by Gam-Anon literature. We've learned that compulsive gambling is an illness, not a moral issue. The disease of gambling is twofold, an addiction coupled with a spiritual emptiness. It can be arrested, but never cured. Only complete abstinence from the first bet of any kind can arrest this illness. No one, not the psychiatrist, neither clergy nor the family, can do this for the gambler. We have found that compulsive gambling does not indicate a lack of affection for the family. It is not a matter of love, but of illness. The gambler has lost the power of choice in the matter of gambling. Even knowing what happens when the first bet is made, the gambler will do so anyway. This is the insanity we speak of in regard to this illness. There's so much Gam-Anon literature. It's a mother lode in the beginning, but anybody who is out there who's struggling with the disease of this gambling and has a loved one who is an active gambler, I would encourage you to come to Gam-Anon. The irony of all of this is that Gam-Anon actually probably saved me from myself. I did make a decision to walk away from my active gamblers. I no longer live under the roof of a gambler, but I continue to go to Gam-Anon. It's my lifeline. Thank you all.
Thank you, Catherine, so much. That was really wonderful. And now to talk about smart recovery are Peg and Leonard.
Hi, my name is Peg, and I'm here with my husband, Leonard. Leonard and I met in 1984, when he had actually been in prison for 10 years already for a crime he didn't commit. And he spent a total of almost 40 years fighting for his freedom. When he finally got out, walked out of the courtroom free, he moved in with me, and his new troubles just began. It just, as you can imagine, there was an incredible amount of stress and culture shock involved in trying to readjust to life out here. He had a job waiting for him in a nonprofit, and he had some individual counseling from a reentry program, but still, none of us can imagine, I think, what he was going through, the trauma that he was coming from and the trauma he was experiencing on the outside. You would hope that I, as his life partner, would be kind of an emotional safe haven in all this, but not so much. I had my own struggles, including a long history of eating disorders, and I was just unprepared and ill-equipped to be a really good support for him. And one of the ways that he found to cope with some of that stress is something that people unfortunately do in prison a fair amount too. He found gambling, something that I took very personally, which I learned along the way was not the right approach. As he was spiraling out of control and it was causing financial insecurity and putting his safety and our relationship in danger, I took it very personally. I was kind of like, why are you doing this to me? And, why can't you just stop? You're ruining everything. We had such a great relationship, all that kind of thing, which is exactly what he really didn't need. And it took him bringing me to his counselor for us to talk together and to start dealing with the problem, bringing it out in the open. And at that point, once it was out in the open, Leonard started going to some Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I started going to Gam-Anon, programs that you've heard about from other people on the board. And it was really an immense relief to be with people who understood some of what we were going through, who had been there, who weren't judging us or making us feel ashamed either about having a gambling problem or about being with somebody who had a gambling problem. There's a common saying in 12-step programs like GA, take what you want and leave the rest. And we wanted and got a lot from GA and Gam-Anon, but both of us also were wanting something else, and we're uncomfortable with some aspects of the program. So we were just kind of always on the lookout for what else was out there. Leonard began to see a counselor who specialized in gambling addiction, and we found a really great couples counselor who's helped us a lot. Like Larry, we had the great good fortune to go to a retreat that was sponsored by the Mass Council. They called them the First Step to Change retreats, and I hope that after the pandemic has become history, those will be starting up again, because it was really life-changing for us. The retreats are a place where people who have a gambling problem can go, and they can also be accompanied by someone, a loved one or a friend who is affected by their gambling. And so there are workshops and discussions separate for family and friends and for the person with a gambling problem, but there are also sessions where we're all in the same room talking and reaching a better understanding of each other. And Leonard and I found that this was something that really worked for us and felt really, really good. And when we left that retreat, we knew that we wanted to find more of that in our lives, but we didn't know exactly where we could find it. It was a real turning point for us when Google brought us to Smart Recovery, which is a different kind of self-help, peer-run, free recovery program. And I guess we can go into a little more detail about the specifics of the program in a minute, but I just wanted to ask Leonard if he wants to talk about what was especially good about SMART for him and for us.
SMART was the type of program that when you check in, you talk about whatever brought you there and your issues that you was dealing with. And when you went around and everybody spoke, you had a chance to think about all of those different things. I chose to use SMART once I got out. Once my 37 years in prison, the first 2 years was pure hell because all I did was gambling. But once I got into SMART and started going to different programs, going to GA and different things, the 90 meetings in 90 days and the programs that I was attending, I think did a lot for me because there's so many things I got out of the different programs. Like it was time to wake up. And gambling changed me from the inside out. Something I just didn't realize what 37 years of petty gambling with cigarettes and stamps became more of an issue when I got out because it was real money that was affecting my relationship and job. So I had to make some changes. I had to wake up to a lot of things. And I spent those 90 meetings in 90 days. I learned so much from different meetings. And it just, the 90 days kept me clean and kept me aware of me and all the things that I learned that I had to deal with. And like I said, it changed me from the outside to the inside. And then once someone told me in the program that is gambling your steering wheel or your spare tire? Took me a long time to realize which was which. But once I stopped gambling, I knew the difference between the steering wheel and the spare tire.
Mhm.
So I give it back to Peg. You can talk more about SMART.
Yeah, that brings up a point that that I want to make. That is, Smart Recovery is not a 12-step program. Some people prefer it to 12-step programs. A lot of people go to both, and or any of the other programs that are out there. But the 90 minutes in 90 days concept was something we took from GA, although really we sort of segued into using Smart Recovery as our main support, both for Leonard as a person with a gambling problem and with me as a loved one. But, you know, so we were able to sort of merge the programs and get what we needed. And that 90 meetings in 90 days is thing that they talk about in Smart too, that it takes about that long, 90 days of continual meetings to start, or it takes 90 days of anything to start a new habit, you know, whether it's quitting something or whether it's starting to meditate, whether it's starting to eat differently or whatever. That's a good length of time to try something and really make it a new habit, a good habit. The other thing about Smart that we both loved is that we could go together, because I had eating disorder issues, and Smart Recovery is not specifically about any one addiction. People in the meetings might have a problem with alcohol, they might have a problem with drugs, they might have a problem with gambling, eating, their sex addiction, anything that is a behavior that is negatively affecting your life to the point where you can't stand it and you want to make a change, however difficult. So we could go to those programs together. And one of the things about the check-ins that Leonard has said to me many times is we learn things about each other that we couldn't really find a way to say to each other face to face. But when you're in this room with all these wonderful, accepting strangers and people that you've come to know, it's just a really relaxed atmosphere. And we actually told the group things that we had never told each other. So we got a much better understanding of each other. Additionally, in the family and friends meetings, as Catherine said, in Gam-Anon, there, you know, it was focused really on learning to take care of ourselves. My life, my week, my day, should not be controlled by what my partner's day, week, life, yeah, as a person struggling with gambling is like. I should be able to take care of myself, have a good day, or try to have a good day, regardless of whether he feels like dealing with having a good day himself, or whether he's completely lost in his self-destructive habit at that moment. It's very difficult, but it's extremely helpful to go to a family and friends group of any kind and learn that. And also, one thing that I really got from SMART was to learn communication tools, ways to interact with my partner that at the very least, didn't make his recovery harder. Hopefully actually made it easier, made him feel more comfortable being honest and open and forgiving of himself, but at the very least didn't castigate him and make him feel guilty and like he was doing this to hurt me. All of that kind of thing I learned in SMART Family and Friends. So I wanted to talk a little more about SMART, specifically what it is, because people haven't heard about it as much as they have the 12-step programs. As I said, it's like GA and other 12-step programs. It's a free program. There are weekly meetings all over the state, all over the country, all over the world. And they're free. They're led by peers who have some recovery under their belt. It's different in that it's not a 12-step program. There are 4 kind of pillars of the program. One is building and maintaining motivation to change. One is coping with the urges that come up when you're trying to change your behavior and having a difficult time. One is learning to manage the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviors that come up, and finding different thoughts and feelings and behaviors to replace the self-destructive ones with. And then the other part is just learning to live a balanced life that has the elements that you've wanted your life to have all along. There's a facilitator who has gone through a training and is able to, has a bunch of mostly cognitive behavioral tools at their disposal. They can bring in exercises and concepts that are helpful to people as needed in the meetings, but it's basically an open discussion format. It's like GA, it's abstinence based. The premise is that you're not trying to figure out how to gamble moderately or binge and purge moderately. You're trying to learn to live without that self-destructive behavior. People tend not to, as they do in 12-step meetings, introduce themselves as I'm an alcoholic, I'm a bulimic, I'm a drug addict or whatever. It's just a subtle difference in perspective, where in SMART, the approach is more that that's not who I am. That's not an essential part of me. That's something I'm trying to change, but I'm not gonna speak of it as who I am or what I am. And another thing is that slips and relapses are very common in recovery, whether you're recovering from the influence of another person's behavior or whether you're recovering from your own addiction. And the SMART perspective on that, which we really took to, was that that's part of the process. The analogy is kind of like if I'm driving a car from Massachusetts to California. Massachusetts is my addiction and California is my recovery, and my car breaks down in Missouri, say, because I have a slip or a relapse. I'm in Missouri with a broken car that needs to get fixed. I'm not back in Massachusetts with a broken car. So we don't start and say, okay, I have 0 days of recovery now, and now I'm starting again at 1. Do you want to talk about that at all, Leonard, about how slips and relapses are dealt with in SMART meetings?
A lot of my slip, I didn't have to start all over. If I had 6 months or a year and slip for a day, we spoke about what was the issue that came up that created the slip. Why? And the slip was every morning I would go to work. I would stop in the convenience store to get a paper. And in order to get a paper, I have to look at all the scratch tickets. So I ended up not getting the paper, but getting scratch tickets and realizing that I needed to go take another route to get a paper, which I didn't need because I was picking up the Herald. We was already getting the Globe delivered to the house. So I just made a detour and just thought about it and laughed about it. Like I went to buy $1 paper and spent $200 in scratch tickets. You know. But
sorry.
one of the other things doing that, like you had said in Gam-Anon, that start taking care of yourself. When you start taking care of yourself, it made me take better care of myself because I couldn't get any more money. So it was kind of like when she woke up to certain things, it made me respect and wake up to certain things. I didn't know the pain and hurt that I was inflicting on her until we started talking about it in the group.
Yeah, so SMART meetings are kind of like a workshop to work on those things, whatever your issue is on a given day. And I just, in closing, I think this is obvious from what we've all been talking about, but a phrase that Leonard and I like to say a lot is there is no wrong door to recovery. So whatever you find on this website or out in the world, whatever you create on your own that works for you, that's what you need to be doing. And we hope you find it. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much, all of you. That was wonderful. There is no wrong door. And I love, Peg, that you said that. You know, there are many pathways, there are no wrong doors. And that's changing a lot in the recovery field. It's a lot more open and a lot more accepting for people to go their own way. We're all different. We all resonate with different things. I'm going to go a little bit into some of the other supports that are out there. This is just sort of a summary of what you've heard. The GA program, there's, you know, the Eastern and Western Mass, depending on where you live, or Betters Anonymous, Gam-Anon, SMART, and then Recovery Road online. That's just a summary slide on that. There are other supports out there that are different. These are other self-help programs, which are 12-step based, but really are not gambling specific at all. But there's so many out there. There's probably a lot more, but I love that these are here. You can see for Native Americans, Buddhists, Celebrate Recovery, which is Christian faith-based, LifeBring, which is secular based, and then even yoga. You know, as I say, there's something for everybody out there, and hopefully you will find it. Some of the information on this webinar may be out of date by the time you find it. The MACGH.org, the council's website, will have the most up-to-date information. So in addition to self-help groups, either online or in person, we highly encourage treatment. And as Peg said, Leonard was seeing a counselor who was trained in gambling disorder. This is very important. Most counselors, all counselors know for the most part about substance use, alcohol and drugs. But gambling is a behavioral addiction, but it was the only one that was put in the diagnostic manual for clinicians because it was so obvious that the brain had changed, but it's still a hidden addiction. So our outpatient treatment centers have clinicians that are trained. There's private practice, and then there are some inpatient facilities. There, as of this moment, there are none in Massachusetts. So always go to our website under the Get Help section, and that will also give you some more information about gambling disorder in general. We didn't go into that in this webinar. This is about recovery. There are plenty of places to find out the warning signs and the risk factors. And one of the robust recovery supports in Massachusetts and in anybody who is a casino gambler, all casinos for the most part, I believe, have this option wherever you're watching this from, called voluntary self-exclusion. You can read this. It's basically making an agreement with the, well, in Massachusetts, it's with the state, the Mass Gaming Commission, to not go to the casino. And I love that Leonard said that he had to figure out a way to get his newspaper without going to a store that showed lottery tickets, because basically voluntary self-exclusion for casino gamblers is that it's avoiding the casino. It's making you, it's voluntary, so no one's forcing you to do it. Hopefully you are at the stage of change where you're ready to put a barrier in front of you. And you do a contract with the game sense advisors in Massachusetts, and there's other procedures in other casinos, but it's basically saying for a year or 3 years or 5 years or ultimately a lifetime, I'm not going to go to the casino. Happily, in Massachusetts, they're being offered remotely now, which is neat, because it was always a problem for gamblers to go to a casino, to not want to go to a casino, you know, it didn't make any sense. So this way you can do it, at least in Massachusetts, remotely. And then these are a ton of self-help support resources in addition to the meeting. So some of that information is on here as well, but this gamblersinrecovery.com, this popped up, I think, in June 2020 because of COVID. These are meetings all over the world. You could hop on it after work at 5 o'clock and be going to a meeting in LA. And there's also for family and friends as well. It's a wonderful website. There's a problem gambling support group as of this moment with Jeffrey Wasserman. This is for younger folks, people in their 20s and 30s. And during the COVID epidemic, I've had a lot of calls from young men or from their parents, mostly men, some women, who has taken up sports betting. So Jeff's group, you have to email him to get in. It's all over the world. Gam Talk is another source. There's one out of Scotland, and then there's the 12-step groups you can see in one place. These are their websites again. Facebook, some people love Facebook. So there are a few Facebook groups out there. You just have to look for them. You can find them, and then you ask to be invited, and you have to be let in. The live chat, the Mass Council on Gaming and Health has a live chat function now. So if you wanted to talk to somebody who knows about the resources, who knows about the subject in real time, in real chat time, you can do that. There are lots of podcasts now. More and more podcasts are coming up, and more people I know love podcasts. I did one on this All In. I think I did it in October of 2020. If you want to hear people's stories, go to any of these podcasts. There are a lot of them. They have one for veterans right here. They're really wonderful. All Bets Are Off is excellent. They're all over the world, and you can just listen to people's stories. My pathway to recovery initially was Gamblers Anonymous. I went in recovery in June 2008. I went to my first meeting. It really resonated with me. And the thing I liked the most was hearing people's stories, not knowing that I was alone in my struggles. There are also some of these apps that you can put on your phone, various things. Some of these are free in some states. I know that North Carolina gives GamBam for free. These are ways to block gambling sites on your phone or your computer. Just sort of like voluntary self-exclusion from casinos. It's self-excluding yourself from your phone and not being tested or tempted by that. The Gamblers Anonymous trustee website has had telephone calls. They've had one or two calls for years and years. During the height of COVID, they had several, and now they have a few. And I would go to their website. Actually, you can see it. I would go directly to the website to see if this is still current. You can see this is September 2021. But they also have Spanish-based meetings, which is wonderful. So, because that is hard to find for non-English speaking people. This is just some pictures of those apps for your phone, just because I'm visual. I like visual pictures. These are the podcasts. Again, you can take screenshots of these, or there'll probably be a way you can download this slideshow. This is the Facebook page. Gam Talk, they have a chat feature there. They have stories of hope. For money, there's a lot to do. Money and gambling, it's an unhealthy relationship. And this is TrueLink is a card for people in recovery, not just gambling. It helps people get money on a card and have it tracked. And it's a really good support. Okay. So, exploring your recovery toolbox. When Chris started out our webinar, she mentioned a lot of these things. So this is just sort of a summary of it. And there's, as I say, there's tons of recovery supports out there, but asking for help is, whether you buy into a 12-step program, where the first step is admitted we were powerless, that's just another way of saying I'm admitting to someone that I need help, whether it's a counselor or you call a helpline or you reach out to a peer, maybe in recovery from alcohol, like how did you get there? Asking for help is really important. It's also one of the hardest things to do. And then going to meetings. And, as I talk to folks on the phone, these last couple of years, especially, there are now so many meeting options. People who don't drive at night or are afraid to go to an in-person meeting, you go to a Zoom meeting. You can go to a telephone meeting first. You could go to a meeting in England where no one's going to know you, just to hear things and just start getting into the habit of going to meetings. And, as Peg and Leonard were saying, 90 meetings in 90 days, that's actually pretty easy now. Before it was a little harder. And I have actually spoken to many people where recommend both the 12-step program and Smart Recovery because they're very different in terms of their approach, and they're excellent together, I think. And get a sponsor for 12-step programs, have sponsors, as Chris and Larry talked about, and then getting involved. Once you get it under your belt, once you're feeling, the good thing about being in recovery is you start getting healthy. You have more time on your hand because you're not gambling. So what are you going to do? Hopefully you can pour it in to whatever pathway is helping you. So these are some of the basic tools. And I think now we're just going to have a little go round with the members of the Recovery Advisory Board, who I'm so grateful we're here today. This is just a pretty picture to look at while we're talking. Chris, do you have anything you want to add as we wrap up?
As you said, I covered some of what was in that slide on the toolbox, because you and I have kind of worked on that toolbox for a few presentations. And
Yep.
So that reminds me that before time of COVID, and hopefully it will start up again, Gamblers Anonymous has usually run at least one mini conference per year with presentations such as the toolbox and other things. And so there are a lot of things that haven't happened in the last 2 years that normally would be a part of being involved with Gamblers Anonymous, with Bettors Anonymous, and hopefully that's all going to get started up again. But thank God for Zoom, that we had these meetings and we continued with our recovery during time when we were maybe not out and about as much as we used to be. So this was really a great, just been great presentation. So that's it.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Catherine, anything to add? Catherine, if you're talking, I can't hear you.
Okay, my apology. I just wanted to share that if you feel that you are not in a good place and you're living with an active gambler, I would encourage you to check out the Gam-Anon website. There's a feast of literature. Everybody who's in Gam-Anon was alone and afraid and thinking that they were on their own, and just making that call or just coming into the website and trawling for the literature. There are some free handouts on the website, but we also have literature. Encourage everybody to come into a meeting. If you don't like that meeting, try a different meeting. We encourage people not to make a life decision. Maybe stick with some meeting for a few weeks. And this is a program that offers hope. you know, we learn over time that recovery is hope. Yeah, it took me a little while to catch on because I just couldn't see past the hopelessness of being born into this disease and how it had affected me over my childhood and over my adulthood as the spouse. But I also had to come to terms with the fact that I was part of the problem. And today I feel that I'm a lot more emotionally healthy than I've ever been. And I owe that to this 12-step spiritual program. Because, you know, the end game is really about serenity. It's about finding yourself when you least expect it and having that quietness of mind to be yourself. I don't take that serenity for granted. I have to chip away and work on it every day. But I feel with the gift of recovery and Gam-Anon, it is my lifesaver. I've learned the courage to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the difference. I've learned that gambling is an emotional disease. And it's so important for me as I charge up for the latter part of my life that I, you know, don't let anybody else own my emotions. Trust myself to make my own decisions and keep that peace. I work very hard to find that peace, and recovery is the biggest gift that I've given myself. And just one last thing about Gam-Anon, and that is that we actually have Spanish literature right now. The books can be mailed. There's no excuse. We have a lot of Zoom meetings. You're very welcome. There's suggested points. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. We encourage everybody to come in, join our meetings, and listen and learn to listen and listen to learn. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Catherine. I love what you said about meetings and trying different meetings. I've said many times to people that meetings are like people. You're not expected to like every one of them. So hence the many pathways, now the many meeting formats that are out there. Recovery is worth patience and persistence. You can tell, I think, from everybody on this webinar that is true. Okay, Larry, some thoughts?
Yep, I've got two things that I wanted to share. Something that Catherine said that struck a chord. If you're living with a gambler, go to a Gam-Anon meeting for one major reason. Learn to see if you're an enabler. Learn to see the role that you play in that process, because you can't fix a gambler, but you can set parameters by which a gambler is expected to function, and that can certainly help in the home life. So it's really, really important. And I will tell you that a lot of gamblers are surrounded by enablers, and that's a very, very bad environment to live in, especially for the enabler, because they're never going to find satisfaction. It's not going to be a healthy lifestyle for them. Second thing I wanted to say was that when you go, if you're looking to recover from gambling and you go to any of these group meetings, whether it's Gamblers Anonymous or any of the other ones, you're going to find people in those rooms who have been through what you're going through. So they understand the challenges that you have, and they know that there are no easy solutions. But even more importantly, it's part of their recovery, as in step 12 of the Gamblers Anonymous, the 12 steps, to help others as part of the recovery, to reach out. They learn through understanding how new people to the program are dealing with their problems. So they're motivated to want to work with you. So you're not a problem, and you're going to be able to talk about the things there that are not widely acceptable to talk about in mainstream society. The things that you're doing or have done are things that it's really hard to find people to talk to that you're not paying for. So you take advantage of these rooms and you get the help that you need, and you connect with people, and they may not look exactly like you, but we are all one step away from living in the gutter if we don't do this, and we don't do it the right way. And those of us who are going through recovery know this, and you will know it too if you give yourself some time and you work at it. That's it.
Thanks, Larry. I do want to mention, and Peg, correct me if I'm wrong, that Smart Recovery has meetings for friends and family.
Correct.
Well, okay, great. Leonard and Peg, anything to share?
Yeah, one of the things that I do every day that keep me grounded and focused, I talk about gambling all the time, whether I'm in a meeting or not in a meeting. And I try to get across to especially young guys and guys that work with me and work for me, that you don't necessarily need money to gamble. The things that you're doing could cost you a lot more than a bet. If you're out in the street committing crimes, you put more on the line than dollars and cents. So, and I talk about that you can, and I know a lot of guys in prison didn't realize that they put more on the line with their life and their loved ones than a scratch ticket or a bet. They didn't realize that they was gambling. They just thought that they was trying to get some money. But if you're trying to get something with a gun in your hand or taking something from someone, you gambling. But they don't see it that way until you start talking about prison behind it. Then all of a sudden it's a wake-up call. That's my take on gambling.
Well, Peg, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a social service kind of job like Leonard does, so I am especially extremely grateful to the Mass Council for giving me the opportunity to be on the Recovery Advisory Board and to be able to give back, because it's so true. I mean, I don't go to 12-step programs. I don't call it the 12th step, but it's so important and fulfilling in my life to be able to help other people reach a better place with this issue. And what was I gonna say? I don't remember what I was gonna say, but that's the most important thing to me. And I'm just grateful if we can help anybody get a little faster. Oh, I know what I was gonna say, sometimes we say SMART meetings, it's like recovery is a bit of a misnomer, because most of us are not recovering to some wonderful place that we've been before. We are creating new lives for ourselves that are even better than the ones we had before we started with whatever addictive behavior we're participating in, because we started it for a reason. There was something lacking in our lives. There was some kind of stress or something that made us turn unfortunately, to a self-destructive behavior to try to cope with it. So my life is better than it's ever been since before I had to deal with this issue, and to be supportive to Leonard and his recovery. And so in a weird way, I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to deal with such a stressful and tragic in many ways problem. And I hope that everyone listening gets to a point where gratitude is the main thing they feel when they think about this issue. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Peg. Yeah, we're all in recovery from something, the whole world. So I really appreciate all the members of the Recovery Advisory Board. I'm going to put up this slide, which has my information, but if any one of the speakers, any one of the members said something that resonates with you, email me right there. You can see right there, email me and, just say you saw this webinar and you really liked what somebody said. I can always ask their permission and you might be able to reach out to them. We've done that many times. These people are incredibly giving, open-hearted people, compassionate, and truly, truly want to help you or your loved one get to the next step in terms of living a healthy life. So that is it for our webinar today. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope that you have enjoyed it, and feel free to reach out to me if you need to. Take care and have a good day.